The warships made quick work of the Dravari swarm. Heavy weapons rained down from the sky and turned the ice fields into fire. The nest was destroyed within hours. The creatures that had terrorized the platoon for 4 days were scattered and burned and buried beneath the broken surface of Aerith 4. The frozen moon, which had nearly become their grave, fell silent again. Medical transports landed on the ridge shortly after. Teams of doctors and field medics from half a dozen species rushed out with stretchers, equipment, and supplies. They moved through the platoon quickly, tagging the worst cases and loading them onto ships. Yuna stood in the middle of it all and watched. She had been treating wounds for 4 straight days. Her hands were raw. Her medical supplies were gone. She had used pieces of alien armor as splints, torn strips from her own clothing for bandages, and melted snow to clean infected wounds. She was exhausted in a way that reached into her bones and pulled at the very center of her. But she did not sit down, not yet. There was something she needed to see first. The rescue teams reached the humans last, not because they were unimportant, but because the humans had waved the medics past them toward the alien wounded first. Every single time a doctor approached a human soldier, the human pointed at someone else and said, "Them first." Minho was sitting on a rock, with his left leg stretched out in front of him. It was clearly broken. The bone had shifted during his climb back up the ridge, after the explosion, and he had been fighting on it for hours after that. A medic tried to examine him, and Minho pointed at a Halori soldier lying nearby with deep cuts across his side. "Him first," Minho said. "He has been waiting longer." Hana had taken a piece of Dravari limb through her left shoulder during the final hours of the battle. The wound was ugly and deep, and had been bleeding slowly for a long time. When a medical team finally reached her, she was sitting next to a Kasari scout, holding a bandage against the alien's chest wound with her good hand. "Give me 5 more minutes," she said to the medics. "I am keeping pressure on this." Jisoo was being carried on a stretcher, with her broken arm wrapped in cloth. As they lifted her, she called out to a nearby Halori engineer. "The power coupling on your forward scanner is loose," she said. "Third panel from the left. Tighten it before you use it, or it will short out." The engineer stared at her as she was carried away, not sure whether to be confused or grateful. Taeho was the last human standing on the ridge. He had refused all medical treatment until every member of the platoon, every species, every soldier had been seen. He walked among the wounded, checking on each one, saying a few quiet words, making sure they had water. His face was covered in dried blood. His uniform was barely holding together. One of his hands was wrapped in a strip of cloth that was soaked dark red. But he moved with the same steady pace he always had, as if his body simply did not know how to stop. Yuna followed him. She watched him kneel beside a wounded Kasari and gently adjust the bandage on the alien's wing. She watched him help 2 Helleri soldiers onto a stretcher. She watched him stand over Bora, who was being loaded onto a heavy transport, and place his hand flat against the insectoid's cracked shell, in a gesture that needed no translation. Bora looked up at him. His dark compound eyes reflected the lights of the medical ships. "Sergeant," he said, his mandibles moving slowly. "Commander," Taeho said. "I owe you a debt I cannot repay." Taeho shook his head. "You owe me nothing. We are soldiers. We fight for each other. That is the deal." Then he said, "I have fought many battles. I have stood beside many species. I have never seen anyone fight the way your people fight." "We did nothing special," Taeho said. "That," Bora replied, "is exactly what makes it special." The transport lifted Bora away, and Taeho stood alone on the edge of the ridge, looking out over the destroyed ice fields. The sun, a pale distant thing in the sky of Aerith 4, was beginning to break through the clouds for the first time since they had arrived. It painted the ice in shades of gold and white, and made the devastation below look almost peaceful. Yuna walked up and stood beside him. They were quiet together for a long time. "How do you do it?" she finally asked. Tato turned to her. "Do what?" "All of it. The fighting, the calm, the way you carry your wounded before you carry yourselves. The way that woman built a machine from garbage that saved all of our lives. The way those 2 soldiers walked into a swarm with bombs strapped to their backs, and then got up and kept fighting after." Tato thought about it. He looked at his damaged hand and flexed his fingers slowly. "I do not know if I have a good answer for that," he said. "Try." He looked back at the ice fields. "On our planet, we are not the strongest animals. We are not the fastest. We do not have the sharpest teeth or the thickest skin. For most of our history, we were prey. Things hunted us. Things killed us. We should have died out a long time ago." He paused. "But we did not. We survived because we did 2 things better than anything else on our world. We worked together, and we refused to quit." Yuna thought about that. She thought about the Kasari with their wings and claws. She thought about Bora's people with their armor and blades. She thought about the Helori with their strength and speed. Every species in the coalition had some natural gift that made them powerful. Some biological advantage that evolution had given them to survive. Humans had nothing. No wings, no armor, no claws, no venom, no extra limbs, nothing. Except each other. And the absolute refusal to stop. "That is why you help the wounded before yourselves," Yuna said, understanding finally clicking into place. "It is not kindness, it is survival. You keep each other alive because alone, you are nothing." Tato looked at her and smiled. It was the first real smile she had seen from him. "We are not nothing alone," he said gently, "but together, we are something more." A transport came for Tato. Medics finally forced him onto a stretcher. As they carried him away, he looked at Yuna and said, "Thank you for keeping us alive, medic. All of us." Then he was gone. Yuna stood alone on the ridge. The wind had died down, and the silence of Aerith 4 wrapped around her. She looked at the spot where the humans had made their stand. A small patch of rock, marked with bullet casings and blood and boot prints. It was not much. It was not impressive to look at. But it was the place where 12 soft-skinned, clawless, armorless creatures had held a line that the strongest warriors in the galaxy could not. She returned to the medical ship and sat down at a terminal. She had a report to write for the Helori Council. It was supposed to be a standard after-action assessment. Species performance, tactical analysis, recommendations for future deployments. She stared at the blank screen for a long time. Then she began to type. She wrote about the ambush and the frozen fields. She wrote about the panic and the scattered formations. She wrote about Bora's warriors falling and the Kasari fleeing the sky. She wrote about the argument and the despair and the long cold nights when every species in the platoon wanted to give up. And then she wrote about the humans. She wrote about Tato walking calmly into a swarm to save an alien who had doubted him. She wrote about Jisoo building the impossible from broken pieces. She wrote about Minho and Hana charging into the open with explosives and then getting back up to fight with broken bones. She wrote about 12 soldiers who treated alien wounded before their own, who ran toward danger instead of away, who held a line not because they were strong enough, but because they chose to. At the bottom of her report, in the section marked Strategic Recommendation, Yuna wrote a single line. She read it twice and then submitted it without changes. It said, "Under no circumstances should the Helori ever find themselves at war with the humans. Not because of their weapons, not because of their ships, not because of their technology, but because they are the only species I have ever seen that becomes more dangerous the more you take from them. Hurt them, and they get back up. Corner them, and they fight harder. Take everything from them, and they will build something from nothing, and come for you with it." She leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. She could still see them, 12 small figures standing on the ice, bleeding and broken, refusing to fall. She had fought beside creatures her whole life, giants with armor, flyers with claws, warriors born with weapons in their hands. But she had never seen anything like what humans could do, and she never forgot it. The signal had gone out. Whether anyone heard it was another question. The platoon had no way of knowing if the fleet received the message or if the burst had simply disappeared into the cold emptiness of space. All they could do was wait and survive. But the Dravari were not going to let them wait. On the morning of the 4th day, the ground started to shake. Una felt it first in her feet, a low trembling that moved through the rock of the ridge and up through her body. She had felt this vibration before, 2 days ago, just before the first attack. But this was stronger, much stronger. Tejo was already on his feet. He walked to the edge of the ridge and looked down at the ice fields below. What he saw made him stop and stand very still. The ice was moving, not in one place, but everywhere. Across the entire plain, the frozen surface was cracking and shifting. Dark shapes were pushing up from below in numbers that made the first attack look like nothing. The Dravari were coming, not in hundreds this time, but in thousands. A black tide of sharp limbs and open mouths, rising from the ground like the moon itself, was giving birth to something terrible. Tejo turned and walked back to the platoon. His face was calm, but his jaw was tight. "They are coming," he said. "All of them." Bora pulled himself up on his damaged legs and moved to the edge to see for himself. He stood there for a long moment. Then he turned to face the platoon and said what everyone was thinking. "We cannot win this fight." The words hung in the cold air. Nobody spoke. Duri was the first to move. He spread his wings and looked at the remaining Kasari. "We fly south," he said. "Now, before they reach the ridge." Suho stamped his front legs. "And go where? We tried this discussion already." "There is nowhere to go." "Anywhere is better than here," Duri said. The alien soldiers began to shift and move. Some were reaching for their packs. Others were looking at the sky, calculating escape routes. The platoon was about to scatter like dust in the wind. Then Tejo spoke. He did not shout. He did not raise his weapon or pound his chest. He stood in the middle of the group and spoke in the same steady voice he always used. But something in that voice made every soldier stop and listen. "I know you are afraid," he said. "I am afraid too. I look at what is coming and every part of me wants to run. That is normal. That is what living things do when death is close. They run." He paused and looked at each species in turn. The Kesari with their folded wings, the Helori with their nervous legs, Bora's warriors with their cracked shells. "But if we run now, we die alone, scattered across the ice, picked off one by one. The Dravari are faster than us. They know this land better than us. If we split up, none of us make it home." He took a breath. The wind pulled at his torn uniform. Blood from an old wound had dried on the side of his face. He looked like a man who should have been in a hospital, not standing on a frozen ridge giving speeches. But his eyes were steady. Always steady. "If we stay together and fight, maybe we die too. I will not lie to you about that. But if we fight together, we give the fleet time to find us. We give that signal a chance to matter. And we give every soldier standing here the best chance of seeing tomorrow." He looked at Bora. "Your warriors are the strongest fighters I have ever seen. I watched you stand against a wave that would have broken any human line." He looked at Duri. "Your scouts have eyes that can see what we cannot. You are the reason we knew the first attack was coming. Your soldiers held the flanks when everything fell apart. You did not break. You bent, but you held." Then he looked at his own small squad of humans. 12 soldiers, some of them wounded, all of them tired, all of them standing. "And we will be right here beside you," he said. "Every step, every moment, until the end, whatever that end looks like." The silence that followed was different from the silence before. It was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of decision. Bora was the first to speak. He pushed himself fully upright, ignoring the pain in his legs. "I will not run," he said. "I was born for battle. If I die, I die fighting." Duri looked at the sky, then back at Tejo. He folded his wings slowly. "My scouts will take the air," he said quietly. "We will be your eyes." Suho stamped his legs, not in nervousness this time, but in determination. "The flanks will hold," he said. Then he turned to his squad. "Minho, Hana, come with me." The three of them walked to the far side of the ridge, where the others could not hear. Yuna, driven by something she could not explain, followed them. She stayed behind a rock and listened. "The main swarm will come from the north," Tejo said. "The ridge gives us a good position, but they will overwhelm us eventually. We need to slow them down, buy time." Minho nodded. He already knew what was coming. Yuna could see it in the way his jaw tightened. "The ice shelf on the north slope," Tejo continued. "If it collapses, it will block the main approach for several minutes, maybe longer. That could be the difference." "You want us to bring it down," Hana said. It was not a question. "I want you to bring it down from the ground," Tejo said. "The explosives need to be placed at the base of the shelf. That means going down there before the swarm reaches the ridge." Minho looked at Hana. Hana looked at Minho. Something passed between them. A conversation without words. Then Minho reached into his pack and pulled out a bundle of explosive charges that Jisoo had put together from salvaged materials. "How much time do we have?" Minho asked. "Not enough," Tejo said. "Get down there, place the charges, and get back. If you cannot get back—" He stopped. He did not finish the sentence. Hana smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they know exactly what they are walking into and have decided to walk into it anyway. "We will get it done," she said. They moved fast. Minho and Hana climbed down the north side of the ridge, while the rest of the platoon prepared their positions. Yuna watched them go. Two small figures moving across the ice toward the dark line of the approaching swarm. The Dravari reached the base of the ridge 10 minutes later. The battle began. It was worse than the first time. The swarm came from three sides, climbing over each other, pouring up the rocky slope like black water. Bora's warriors met them at the top with blades swinging. The Kesari dove from above, striking and pulling away. The Hilori held the sides with their heavy bodies and strong legs, and the humans fired and fired and fired. Yuna worked in the middle of it all, pulling wounded soldiers back, pressing bandages against wounds, shouting instructions in 4 different languages. She lost track of time. She lost track of everything except the next wound, the next soldier, the next life to save. Then she heard the explosion. It was massive. The entire north face of the ridge shook, and a wall of ice and rock collapsed downward. The sound was like thunder trapped inside a box. A cloud of white dust rose into the air, and for a moment the northern swarm disappeared beneath tons of frozen ground. The Dravari assault stuttered. The main wave was buried. The creatures on the other sides hesitated, confused by the sudden loss of their largest group. It was only minutes, but in battle, minutes were everything. Yuna looked north and saw 2 small figures climbing back up the slope. Minho was limping badly. Hana had blood running down one arm, but they were moving. They were alive. They reached the ridge and collapsed behind the human line. Minho looked up at Tejo and said, through heavy breaths, "Charges placed. Ice shelf down. You owe us dinner." Tejo did not smile. He just said, "Get up. We are not done yet." And they got up. Yuna would remember that moment for the rest of her life. Two humans, broken and bleeding, standing up because someone told them the fight was not over. No argument. No hesitation. Just two soldiers getting back on their feet because that was what needed to be done. The battle continued. The Dravari regrouped and came again. The platoon fought and bled and held. Every species gave everything they had. But it was the humans, always the humans, who filled the gaps, who ran toward danger instead of away from it, who carried the wounded, and held the line when it was about to break. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. Yuna could not tell anymore. The world had become nothing but ice and blood and the sound of fighting. And then, through the clouds above, a light appeared. It was bright and sharp, and it cut through the gray sky like a blade. Then another light appeared beside it, and another, and another. Ships, coalition warships, dropping through the atmosphere in a tight formation. Their engines burned orange against the white sky, and the sound of their approach rolled across the ice fields like the voice of something ancient and powerful. The fleet had heard the signal. Jisoo, sitting against a rock with a broken arm, looked up at the ships and laughed. It was a small, exhausted, wonderful laugh. "It was enough," she whispered. "It was enough." 2 days passed after the first attack. The platoon had moved to higher ground, a ridge of dark rock that rose above the ice fields. It was not much, but it gave them a view of the land around them, and made it harder for the Dravari to come from below. Taeho had suggested the position. Bora had agreed without argument. Something had changed between them after the battle. Bora no longer looked at Taeho the way he looked at something small and unimportant. He looked at him the way one soldier looks at another. But the situation was bad. They had lost nearly a third of the platoon in the first attack. Several Kasari were too injured to fly. 2 of Bora's heavy warriors were dead. The Halori had taken casualties on both flanks, and the communication relay, the device that connected them to the coalition fleet, had been destroyed during the ambush. They were alone on a frozen moon, with no way to call for help. Food was running low. Water could be melted from ice, but it took energy they did not have. Medical supplies were almost gone. Yuna had been working without rest since the battle, moving from patient to patient, treating wounds with whatever she had left. She had used strips of clothing as bandages. She had cleaned wounds with melted snow. She was keeping soldiers alive through will alone. The alien soldiers were breaking. Yuna could see it in their eyes and in the way they sat. The Kesari huddled together in small groups and spoke in whispers. The Helari paced back and forth, their 4 legs moving in nervous patterns. Even Bora's remaining warriors, creatures born for battle, sat still and quiet, their mandibles moving in slow, defeated rhythms. On the 3rd morning, the argument started. A Kesari officer named Duri stood up and spoke loudly so everyone could hear. "We must retreat," he said. His wings were folded tight against his back, and his voice was sharp. "The nest is too large. The swarm is too many. If we stay here, we die." A Halori captain named Suho stepped forward on his 4 legs. "Retreat where?" he asked. "The transport is damaged. We have no communication. We cannot reach the fleet." "Then we move south," Duri said. "There are caves. We can hide. We can survive until someone comes looking for us." "No one is coming," Bora said. His voice was deep and heavy. He sat against a rock, his injured legs stretched out in front of him. His shell was cracked in several places, and one of his arms hung loose at his side. "The fleet does not know we are in trouble. If we hide, we die slowly instead of quickly. That is the only difference." The argument grew louder. Duri accused Bora of wanting to throw their lives away. Suho argued that splitting up would make them easier targets. Others joined in, each species shouting over the other. The platoon was tearing itself apart from the inside. Yuna watched from the edge of the group. She felt the same fear they all felt. She wanted to run too. She wanted to find a dark hole and crawl inside and wait for it to be over. But she also knew that running would not save them. Then she noticed something. The humans were not part of the argument. They were not sitting in despair. They were not shouting. They were working. Jisoo was sitting in a small area she had cleared among the rocks. Around her was a circle of broken equipment, pieces of the destroyed communication relay, parts from a damaged Kasari scanner, wiring from a Hillary power unit, and several components from human gear. Her hands moved quickly, stripping wires, connecting circuits, testing connections. Her face was focused in a way that shut out everything else around her. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Building a relay," Jisoo said. Yuna looked at the pile of broken parts. From this? 3 different species technology? None of these systems are compatible. Jisoo did not look up. "They do not need to be compatible," she said. "They just need to work together long enough to send one signal." The technicians already looked at this. The Kesari engineers said it was impossible. The Hillary agreed. The systems do not connect. Jisoo finally looked up. There were dark circles under her eyes. Her fingers were cut and bruised. She had not slept in 2 days. But her eyes were clear and sharp. "They said it was impossible because they were looking for the right way to do it," she said. "I am not looking for the right way. I am looking for any way." Yuna did not know what to say to that. She just watched. Taeho came over and set down a cup of melted snow next to Jisoo. He just made sure she had water and then went back to his squad. Minho brought her a piece of dried food from his own rations. Hana brought a small light so Jisoo could see better as the sky grew dark. The humans moved around Jisoo like a machine. Quiet, efficient, each one knowing their role without being told. The argument among the alien soldiers continued through the afternoon and into the evening. Voices rose and fell. Accusations were made. Old tensions between species surfaced. The Kesari blamed the Hillary for breaking formation during the first attack. The Hillary blamed the Kesari for poor scouting. Bora said nothing, but his silence was louder than any of the shouting. Night fell on Aerith 4, and the temperature dropped even further. The alien soldiers eventually stopped arguing, not because they had reached a decision, but because they were too tired and cold to continue. They sat in separate groups, divided by species, divided by fear. Yuna stayed near the humans. She was not sure why. Maybe it was because they were the only ones who did not seem to be falling apart. Taeho had organized a watch rotation. Minho and Hana took the first shift, sitting at the edge of the ridge with their weapons ready, staring out into the darkness. The other humans slept in short shifts, 2 hours on, 2 hours off. Always someone awake. Always someone watching. At some point during the night, Yuna fell asleep against a rock. She woke to the sound of a sharp electronic beep. She opened her eyes. The sky was still dark, but there was a faint glow of light coming from Jisoo's work area. Yuna got up and walked over. Several alien soldiers were already gathering, drawn by the sound. Jisoo was sitting in the middle of her circle of broken parts. In her hands was something that looked like no device Yuna had ever seen. It was ugly. Wires stuck out at odd angles. 3 different types of power cells were taped together with strips of cloth. A Kesari antenna was welded to a Hillary transmitter board, which was connected to a human radio unit with exposed circuits. It should not have worked. Every engineer in the coalition would have said so. But it was beeping. And on a small cracked screen, a single green light was blinking. "Is that?" Yuna started. "A signal," Jisoo said. She was smiling. It was a small, tired, beautiful smile. "It is not strong. It will not last long. But if the fleet is listening on emergency channels, they will hear it." Bora pushed through the gathered soldiers and looked down at the device. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "The engineers said this could not be done." Jisoo looked up at him. They were wrong, she said simply. Dury stepped forward, his wings slightly open. How? He asked. How did you make 3 incompatible systems work together? Jisoo shrugged. I did not make them compatible. I just made them talk to each other. It is not elegant. It is not pretty. But it works. Taeho appeared behind her and put a hand on her shoulder. He looked at the gathered aliens and said, Send the signal. Include our position and the size of the Dravari nest. Tell them we are still here. Jisoo pressed a button. The device hummed and shook slightly. The green light blinked faster. A burst of data shot out into the frozen sky. Then the device sparked, smoked, and died. Jisoo set it down gently and said, That is all it had. Was it enough? Yuna asked. I do not know, Jisoo said, but it was more than nothing. The platoon stood in silence under the dark sky. For the first time since the ambush, no one was arguing. They were all looking at a small, ugly, impossible machine, built by a human woman who refused to accept that something could not be done. Yuna looked at Taeho. He was looking at the sky, as if waiting for an answer from the stars. She was beginning to understand something deeper now. The humans were not strong because they were tough or brave, though they were both of those things. They were strong because they simply did not know how to give up. Somewhere inside them, in a place that Yuna could not understand, there was a fire that burned even when everything around it was ice. And that fire was keeping them all alive. Aerith 4 was a dead world. The surface was covered in thick gray ice that stretched in every direction without end. The sky was white and heavy with clouds that never broke. The wind cut through everything. It moved across the flat, frozen ground like a living thing, carrying sharp crystals of ice that hit exposed skin like tiny knives. The temperature was far below freezing, and even inside the transport, Yuna could feel the cold pressing against the walls. The platoon landed 2 kilometers from the Dravari nest. The transport doors opened, and the cold hit them all at once. Yuna saw several Kesari soldiers pull their wings tighter around their bodies. The Halori soldiers stomped their 4 legs to keep their blood moving. Even Bora, whose thick shell usually protected him from everything, moved his mandibles in a way that told Yuna he was uncomfortable. The human stepped out into the cold and said nothing. Taeho pulled his collar up, adjusted his gloves, and started walking. The rest of his squad followed without a word. They did not complain. They did not hesitate. They just moved forward. Yuna fell into step beside Jisoo, who was carrying a heavy pack of tools and equipment on her back. Are you not cold? Yuna asked. I am freezing, Jisoo said. But cold does not kill you if you keep moving. The platoon advanced in a wide formation across the ice. Bora took the lead with his heavy warriors, 6 insectoid soldiers with thick armor and massive bladed arms. Behind them came the Kesari scouts, using their sharp eyes to scan the horizon. The Halori soldiers moved on the flanks, their 4 legs giving them good stability on the ice. And in the center, almost like an afterthought, were the 12 humans. They walked for nearly an hour before the first sign of the enemy appeared. It was a sound, a low vibration that came from beneath the ice. Yuna felt it in her chest before she heard it with her ears. It was like a heartbeat, but wrong. Too fast, too hungry. The ground beneath them was alive with movement. Aura raised one arm, and the platoon stopped. Everyone was silent. The vibration grew louder. Then the ice exploded. They came from below, hundreds of them. The Dravari were black and fast, with long segmented bodies and sharp limbs that ended in points like spears. They moved like water, flowing over each other, climbing, jumping, never stopping. Their mouths were wide and filled with teeth that curved inward. Once they bit, they did not let go. The first wave hit Bora's heavy warriors. The insectoid soldiers swung their bladed arms and cut through dozens of Dravari. But for every one they killed, 10 more took its place. The swarm climbed over the fallen bodies of their own kind, without pause. They only cared about moving forward. Yuna watched in horror as one of Bora's warriors, a massive soldier she had spoken to just that morning, was pulled down by a group of Dravari. They swarmed over him, their sharp limbs finding the gaps in his shell. He fought hard. He killed many, but there were too many, and he stopped moving. The Kesari took to the air, firing down at the swarm with energy weapons, but the Dravari were fast, and the ice and wind made it hard to fly. One Kesari was struck by a jumping Dravari and pulled out of the sky. 2 more were hit by the ice wind and lost control, crashing into the ground where the swarm was waiting. Panic spread. Yuna could feel it moving through the platoon like a disease. The Helori on the left flank broke formation and started running. Even some of Bora's warriors began to step backward, their mandibles clicking in patterns that meant fear. Then Yuna heard something she did not expect. Gunfire. Steady, controlled. Not the wild shooting of panic, but the calm rhythm of discipline. She turned and saw the humans. Taeho stood at the center of his squad. He was not shouting. He was not waving his arms. He simply pointed and spoke in short, clear words. Left side, 3 rounds, hold. His voice carried over the wind like it was made of iron. The human soldiers fired in bursts. 3 shots, pause, 3 shots, pause. Each burst hit its target. The Dravari in front of the human line dropped one by one. Not in a dramatic explosion of alien technology, but with simple bullets placed in exactly the right spot. Minho stood on the right side of the line with a heavier weapon. He fired in longer bursts to cover a wider area. His face was tight with concentration, but his hands were steady. Next to him, Hana moved between positions, firing and relocating, firing and relocating. She never stayed in one place long enough for the swarm to reach her. When a group of Dravari tried to flank the humans from the left, Taeho did not panic. He tapped 2 soldiers on the shoulder, and they turned to face the new threat without breaking the rhythm of the squad. The line adjusted. The firing continued. The Dravari fell. But the humans were not just fighting for themselves. Yuna saw Minho leave his position and run toward a fallen Helori soldier who was lying on the ice with a Dravari on top of him. Minho kicked the creature off, shot it twice, and then grabbed the Helori by the arm and dragged him back behind the human line. The alien was twice his weight, but Minho pulled him through the ice without stopping. Hana did the same for a wounded Kesari who had crashed nearby. She threw her own jacket over the alien's torn wing and pulled her to safety while firing her sidearm with her other hand. Yuna stood frozen. She had never seen anything like it. Every other species in the platoon was either fighting for their own survival or running. But the humans were doing both, fighting and saving, at the same time, without hesitation. Taeho saw Bora struggling. The big insectoid had taken hits to 2 of his legs and was moving slowly. A wave of Dravari was closing in on him. Taeho turned to his squad and said, "Cover me." Then he walked, not ran, walked, into the swarm toward Bora. He fired as he moved. Every shot was placed with care. He did not waste a single bullet. When he reached Bora, he put himself between the wounded alien and the approaching swarm, and held his position until 2 more humans came forward to help pull Bora back. Bora looked down at Taeho as he was dragged to safety. The human's face was bleeding from a cut on his forehead. His uniform was torn, but his eyes were the same as they had been on the station, calm and steady. "Why?" Bora asked. "Because you are with us," Taeho said, and that was all. The first wave eventually passed. The Dravari pulled back into the ice, regrouping for the next attack. The platoon was broken and scattered across the frozen ground. Many were wounded, Some were dead. The alien soldiers sat in silence, breathing hard, their confidence shattered. But in the center of the chaos, the humans were already moving. They set up a perimeter. They treated wounds. They counted ammunition. They prepared for the next wave. Yuna walked among them with her medical supplies and saw something that surprised her more than anything else that day. The humans were not celebrating. They were not resting. They were already getting ready for more. She stopped next to Jisoo, who was repairing a broken communicator with hands that were shaking from the cold. "Are you all right?" Yuna asked. Jisoo looked up and gave a tired smile. "I am alive," she said. "That is enough for now." Yuna looked around at the frozen battlefield. She saw alien soldiers twice the size of humans, sitting in shock. She saw warriors with natural armor and built-in weapons staring at the ground with empty eyes. And she saw 12 humans standing in the cold, bleeding and bruised, quietly preparing for the next fight. She was beginning to understand something. Something she had never considered before. Strength was not about claws. It was not about armor or size or speed. It was about what you did when everything around you was falling apart. Yuna had seen many species go to war. She had watched the Halori charge across burning plains with their 4 legs pounding the ground like thunder. She had seen the Kesari fly through the sky and tear enemies apart with claws that could cut through metal. She had watched Bora's people, the tall insectoid warriors with armor built into their very skin, stand against explosions without flinching. War, in her experience, belonged to the strong. So when the coalition announced that humans would be joining their platoon, Yuna did not feel excitement. She felt confusion. She stood on the landing platform of Station Ura and watched the human transport ship descend through the gray clouds. It was a small and ugly ship. There were burn marks along its side and patches of metal welded over old holes. It looked like it had been through a dozen battles and repaired each time with whatever was lying around. Yuna crossed both sets of her arms and tilted her head. "That is their ship?" she said. Bora stood next to her. He was nearly 3 meters tall. His dark shell caught the light, and his mandibles clicked together slowly, which was the way his species showed amusement. "I told you," he said, "they are not impressive." The ramp of the ship came down with a loud hiss. Smoke rolled out. Then the humans walked down one by one. Yuna counted 12 of them. They were short compared to Bora. They had no claws, no armor on their skin, no extra limbs. They wore simple uniforms with light body armor strapped over their chests and legs. They carried weapons that looked plain and mechanical. Nothing advanced, nothing elegant. At the front of the group was a man named Taeho. He had short dark hair and calm eyes. There was a scar on the left side of his jaw that ran from his ear to his chin. He walked with a steady pace, not fast, not slow. He looked around the station the way someone looks at a room they have entered many times before. Not nervous, not excited, just aware. Behind him walked a woman named Jisoo. She had tools hanging from every pocket and strap on her vest. Her hands were rough and stained with grease. She was already looking at the station walls and ceiling, like she was studying how everything was built. Then came 2 younger soldiers, Minho and Hana. Minho was tall for a human and had broad shoulders. He carried a heavy pack on his back, without complaint. Hana was smaller, but moved with a sharpness that Yuna noticed right away. Her eyes were always scanning, always watching. Taeho stopped in front of Bora and looked up at him. The size difference was almost funny. Bora could have crushed the human with one arm. But Taeho did not seem bothered by this at all. He simply nodded and said, "Sergeant Taeho, Human Infantry, we are here to fight." "I can see that," he said. "Though I wonder what you plan to fight with." Taeho did not react. He just said, "We will show you when the time comes." Yuna was assigned to work closely with the human squad as a field medic. Her job was to keep all species alive during combat. She had studied alien biology for many years and knew how to treat wounds across dozens of species. But she had never treated a human before. She had read about them, of course. Soft skin, fragile bones compared to most species, slow healing, no natural weapons. On paper, they were one of the weakest species in the coalition. She approached Jisoo that evening in the supply room. The human woman was sitting on the floor surrounded by pieces of broken equipment. She had taken apart a Kesari scanner and was rebuilding it with parts from a Halori communicator. "What are you doing?" Yuna asked. "Fixing this," Jisoo said without looking up. The scanner was dead. But the power cell from the communicator fits if you adjust the connectors. It will not be perfect, but it will work. Yuna watched her hands move. They were fast and confident. She was not following any manual or guide. She was just figuring it out as she went. "Your species does this often?" Yuna asked. "Take broken things and force them to work again?" Jisoo smiled. "You have no idea," she said. Over the next few days, Yuna observed the humans carefully. She expected them to be nervous. They were about to go to war against the Dravari, a swarm species that moved in massive waves and consumed everything in their path. Entire planets had fallen to them. Even the strongest species in the coalition treated the Dravari with fear. But the humans did not seem afraid. They trained every morning. They ran when the other species walked. They practiced formations and hand signals over and over, until every movement was perfect. They checked their weapons and gear obsessively. Every bullet was counted. Every strap was tightened. Every piece of equipment was tested twice. Minho and Hana sparred with each other every evening. Yuna watched them throw each other to the ground, get up, and do it again. They laughed while they did it, like it was a game. "Why do they train so hard?" Yuna asked Bora one night. "Their bodies are weak. No amount of training will give them claws or armor." Bora was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I have fought beside humans once before. A long time ago, a small battle that no one remembers." "And?" Yuna pressed. "And I watched a human soldier carry 2 wounded Kesari out of a collapsing building while his own leg was broken." Bora turned his large dark eyes toward her. "I do not understand them, but I learned not to dismiss them." Yuna thought about that. She looked across the station common area where Tejo sat alone, cleaning his rifle. His hands moved with the same steady rhythm as everything else he did. There was nothing special about him, nothing that stood out. He was just a man sitting quietly, preparing for war. And yet, something about that image stayed in her mind. The deployment order came 3 days later. The platoon would be sent to a frozen moon called Aerith 4. Intelligence reports said the Dravari had built a nest there. The mission was to destroy it before the swarm could grow large enough to threaten the nearby systems. As the platoon loaded into the transport, Yuna looked at the humans one last time. 12 of them. Soft skin, no claws, no armor, no wings. They stood among giants and monsters and creatures with natural weapons built into their bodies. And not one of them looked afraid. Yuna did not understand it yet, but she would. Soon enough, she would understand exactly what humans could do.